Hello, everyone. Thank you, Jay. Thank you so much. And hey, thank you for all of the people who are tuning in to hear from tonight's filmmakers. First off, the Woods Hole Film Festival is happening now, and it's running through August 1st. This is the time to really not only watch films, but then join us here for these Q&As. We're also holding filmmaker chats in the morning, so there's lots of opportunity for you to connect with filmmakers. But we have two filmmakers with us tonight for Finding Courage. And first, I want to welcome Kay Rubacek, the co-producer and director of the film. Hello, Kay.
Hello, thank you.
And then we also have Paulio Shakespeare, also a co-producer and cinematographer.
Hi, guys.
Well, I want to jump right into it since we don't have a ton of time. We have enough time to get all of our questions to really talk about and dive into this documentary. Kay, could you tell us first, give us an overview of the film to start with, and then we'll go from there.
The film Finding Courage is I like to say it's a family story. It's a story about a family that overcomes great tragedy. And the location is, there's two locations. It's set in America, but also set in China. So it's about essentially three siblings that all get arrested in China. One is sent to prison, one is sent to a labor camp, and one escapes. And so it's the woman who escapes. We followed her story. And this is really her story, how she was really quite desperate to get her family back together again, and how she, what she had to do that, and the risks she had to put her family into to try and bring them back together again.
So, Kay, how did you come to this story? How did this story find you? And often as documentary directors, these stories kind of, they find us. So tell us a little bit about that process.
It's so true. Really, our last documentary was on a China human rights subject. It's called Hard to Believe. And from there, we actually met this woman. We were interviewing witnesses who had been in slave labor and forced labor conditions in China. Some of them had been treated terribly, and others had received very strange sort of tests that were being used as that kind of was pointing to some really serious crimes going on in China with harvesting people's organs. I mean, it was horrific. But what we found was this one woman, and she had this amazing story. And really, this is her story. Her name's Yifei Wang, and she lives in San Francisco, and she was really just living in exile without having her very close family with her. And once we got to know her story, we wanted, it was just going to be a 10-minute film. Really, that's what this was going to be. It was going to short 10-minute film. And as we dug into it deeper, and as her family situation started to change, we were able to document that. And we were able to secure some really exclusive undercover footage inside a Chinese labor camp, and former Chinese regime officials who usually don't want to go on camera. And it was kind of difficult to get them on camera, but we got them in there as well. So once all these things started happening, and mainly once her family story started to develop, we realized this is no longer a short portrait documentary. This is actually a story happening in real time. And that brings its own challenges, but that it really was, as you said, the story kind of found us, so to speak.
Well, I find it fascinating that this was, a 10-minute documentary. I mean, I think that's almost all of us where, we, even when we were working in narrative, we how long are we going to take this on for? So let's talk first about footage. So Paulio, and you can chime in on this. And I like getting to the technical things. How much footage exactly do you have? But not only that, you have the interviews, the found footage. You've got historical archival footage in here. Tell us a little bit about the process of piecing this together and finding and getting what you needed. Small question.
Paulio, did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I think the footage, the archive's like about 10 terabytes. It's the biggest documentary amount of footage that I've ever worked on. And there was a lot of archive footage that we pulled from various TV stations. It took a long time to get access to the footage through archive researchers and whatnot. So we had to go through a lot of TV channels to find some of those clips that were from those periods. And yeah, like any documentary, we did a lot of filming, and we actually had, you know, multiple other characters that we filmed related to the family that never really made the story. And it was an interesting process. Some of those might get made into other short films, but yeah, it's a, it's a big undertaking for sure.
Right, right. So how, you know, when you're dealing with archival footage and, you know, when you're coming at this from a cinematographer standpoint, you know, how closely are you working? Like, how many editors did you bring in on this? And heaven forbid, did you sit in front of the computer yourself? You probably both did, I imagine.
Kay took care of the most of the post-production. I really did most of the production work, like filming with her on set. And there was a couple other editors that came in and worked with her. And you know, helped at different stages, and you know, there was a couple story editors that worked as well.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes when you start these things, it's just it gets overwhelming, and you're like, where to take the story, because there's so many different ways you can take it. And those story editors just help you kind of like get back on track and figure out, okay, this is the character. And originally the story started out with Yifei, and then the brother came out of jail after 12 years in prison. And we're like, oh, wow, we really should feature the brother. So then it kind of expanded, and yeah.
So as the director, Kay, what was your guiding compass when it came to telling the story, seeing as there are so many arms you could take this on?
That was the big challenge. And I think in the filming, during the production, it was look for what's interesting, look for what's authentic, look for what's captures. You know, it's kind of interesting filming an Asian family. There was a lot of cultural differences and things that I would personally be really comfortable with, they were not comfortable with. And I think the guiding compass, and this was through the production, but mostly in the editing process, was how to help tell their story. Because if they were to do it themselves, I think it would be a real challenge, because the way they express it is they're really coming from a different culture, from another world. And even though they're living here now, it's they're still working on that assimilation process, and they're really trying, but sometimes it's really challenging. And we tried to capture some of that too, just to make it relatable. And for them, they would look at that and say, well, why is that interesting? But for me, that was gold. That was like, wow, that's really interesting to see how they react to something. And then I think for people in a similar situation to them, or people who are just observers and may not have thought about that before, then they can kind of look at that and say, oh, I get that. And I think it's just kind of building empathy and understanding towards these characters that you just rarely get to go inside the family home of a family like this. And we felt, you know, pretty honored actually to be able to get the access that we did. And once we did, it was really, okay, how to honor that access, how to be authentic and not sugarcoat things, because it's the storytelling for, you know, coming from China they would say it very differently. But we want to be considerate to them as well, so that they can also watch this film and feel proud of it too, and feel that they've been represented fairly. But our perspectives are so different. And so that was a real weight during the entire editing process, was how to bridge that gap between the cultures and make it so that can the audience understand them and accept just this is their experience. You just see it and you just try and live in someone else's shoes for some time. So that was kind of the compass. But as to how it played out, there was a lot of changes, a lot of work, and
a lot of ways to go. The theme of family throughout the film, you know, and she says something, you can probably quote it better, but you know, the family is essential. You know, holding up family is essential, and honoring family is essential. So I love what you said about they want to be able to watch this and feel proud and feel good about it, but also that it did justice to family. But talk a little bit more about, you know, okay, and again, you've got really intimate access to the inside of this family. How did that weigh on all the decisions they were making going forward?
Very heavy. It was really heavy for them. It was really heavy for us. The family were going through so much during the process of filming, and they were going through so much during the process of editing. And it was really hard knowing that that's going on. And I'm working on the story that we'd filmed a year or two ago, but they've got new stuff coming out, and they're not new stuff coming out, but like they're dealing with basically their family's in danger, because if this story is told, that's the risk. They still have family in China. Some of the family members have got out during that time, so there was that relief, and that came closer toward the end of post-production, which was a great relief for me. Really, it was just to know that they were safe, and that we could actually put this out, and that they would feel comfortable. We had wanted to release it earlier. It wasn't ready, and thank goodness for that, because if we had, Gordon, the husband, could have really been in dire straits. So there was just a lot of things to juggle on it wasn't just the storytelling, but we're really dealing with people's lives. These are real people who have serious danger, and I would be thinking, okay, here I'm complaining about something or other here, and I'm thinking, yeah, these guys have spent, a decade in prison, and they're still dealing with life and death right now. So, it's like, it kind of puts things into perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. And, Paulio, you've got to put a camera into the lives of these people and get the most authentic thing from them. Tell us a little bit about how you did that, and what were the challenges?
Well, it's interesting actually, because there was a lot of some of their friends of the family were also had a bit of experience filming, and I found out that when I put a camera in their hands, sometimes because they're so close to the family, they wouldn't sense that the camera was around them so much. So, I did most of the filming, but I often found that I could put the there was another guy, Max, who used to be around the family quite a bit, and he would often get some great shots for us, and he actually helped with the sound as well. So it's interesting, just like to be able to utilize the friends, some of the friends of the family, to help us with that. And they were very easy to work with. The lady had been on a few TV shows and a few news shows with Fox News and whatnot, a few other networks. So she was familiar. She comes from a television, television background, or journalist background,
right,
in China, working with cameras. So and the husband also was really helpful with, helping us, film, because he's obviously a cameraman in China,
right,
and whatnot. So yeah, it's like I can't really claim total, you're just kind of utilizing what you have to try and capture it.
Well, I'll give you credit for working it out, and finding the resources that you need. For those of you tuning in, just to let you know, the voice you're hearing is Paulio, even though you can't see him. Paulio Shakespeare, who's the cinematographer on the film Finding Courage, and we're also speaking with the director, Kay Rubacek. And so, Kay, something you said about the stakes, the real danger. There's really tangible. There's a lot of what feels like James Bondy espionage things happening, and like cameras and glasses and trying to get the secret footage. As a film crew, how did you I can't imagine the fear of, I need to tell this story. I don't want to put a family in jeopardy, but I need to tell this story. Tell us a little bit about that dance, about some of the danger, honestly.
Yeah, it's pretty stressful. Yeah, it's pretty stressful. It's stressful for them. It's stressful for us. Originally, our main character refused to speak on camera. She was too nervous to have her voice heard. And she said, "Oh, look, I can walk and I can walk around and you can film me a bit, but I cannot talk on camera." And then her husband was very hesitant, and there was a few other characters that were really hesitant. So it took time for them to feel comfortable with us. And it also took time for them to understand what we were doing. And then as the process developed, and then they started to see, okay, we really think you guys are going to tell this story fairly, then they started to let us know, like, well, actually, we do have this meeting coming up at the labor camp, and we could film that for you. And we, you know, they're planning on doing it anyway. So it's not like they were filming it for us, but we were able to input in that and say, yes, that would be fantastic, but are you sure you're going to do this? And if you're going to do it, can you get as much as you can and just get everything you can, get as many audio, get as many angles as you can, and they really did such an amazing job. So it's just, once they came to understand, and like Paulio said, Ife and her husband were journalists in China. So they do understand the value of telling a story that people can relate to. And they understand that you kind of have to prove that it's happening for people. And how do you prove that when it's so hard to get anything out of China? So they really were able to help, and we got that different footage in different locations around the city in China, and different cities actually. We had a whole bunch. So going through that footage, even though some of it, you know, it's jumpy and bumpy, and but I really just felt that was just so precious. And so it was a real balance of stress and excitement that, like, wow, we've actually got this, and I'm going to find a way to use it. So it was, yeah, a real balance between those two kind of emotions, I think.
Right. I mean, I can't imagine, you know, and as filmmakers, we're not typically trying to say to our talent, oh, by the way, can you go get this footage for us?
No, you can't. It's a documentary too, right? You just can't go and,
but you know, and I wonder, just, you know, within journalism, there's also, I wonder how much fighting against those journalistic instincts you had to have with her and her husband, just because, you know, when you think about, oh, I'm going to tell this pure story of documentary with mission, but there's journalism.
That's such a huge, constant challenge from beginning to end, because you want to get their trust. You need access. You have to gain their trust, but then you have to tell it in a way that they are not controlling, because that is what undermines the story. If it's them telling the story, then let them tell the story. Don't pretend that you're telling the story if they're doing it. So that's the real challenge. They really came around to understanding that and giving us a lot of leeway once they came to understand and get to know us better. But it's just that, I think basically what it came down to was just fact checking everything, just triple checking everything, being able to make sure we have footage to show, and for everything that we can. And if there's something that we say in the film, or that she says, or we show, that we can back that up. Every frame we have evidence to say, to back it up, because we just felt it has to be foolproof. Otherwise, like, journalistically sound. Otherwise, if one piece isn't sound, then the whole story can really fall apart. And that's sort of basically what we felt it had to come down to, is just getting that authenticity from them personally, but keeping the facts journalistic. And it's a real challenge, but you kind of got to do both, I think, too, if you want to engage people emotionally. And that's, what we were going for.
Absolutely. So we have a question from Steve, who says, how did you find the various former Chinese officials? How did they get into your circle? Or you're in theirs?
Yeah. Yeah, that was a challenge. Two of them I had followed. They defected years ago, 2005, and they were pretty high profile former officials. And when they defected, I had followed their stories, and I thought, this is pretty amazing. You know, a former secret agent for the Chinese regime coming forward and speaking out. Wow. Another one was a former diplomat. And I was living in Sydney, Australia then, and he was in Sydney. So I got to meet him. So I knew of their stories. I don't think they would have remembered me, but I remembered them, and they were a starting point. And then from there, it was just a matter of researching and then, okay, who might know this person? And, 6 degrees of separation. It was like, okay, you call someone. Do you know this person? I've heard this person's defected. Is there anyone? And by the way, is there any way I could get someone from the propaganda department? That was like, really want to get that. How do we get that? We had to go to New Zealand to get that.
Wow.
And we didn't think we were going to get it. It just came up very suddenly, very unexpectedly while we were filming in Australia, these two other defectors. And I thought I'd lost my chance with another propaganda official who refused to speak to us. And then suddenly, while we were in Sydney, this, again, a friend of a friend of a friend said, I heard you're looking for this person. I know someone. And he really didn't want to speak to us because it's really uncomfortable for them. It's very uncomfortable to kind of go back to that. They've tried to start anew, and to go back there, and there's a lot of guilt, there's shame, there's a whole lot of emotions going on, and they're like, why is this even interesting to you? Right. You know, they don't really understand why it's interesting, but their stuff is just not out there. You don't see it. They don't write books. They don't write memoirs. So it's really, it was fascinating. And so it was just a lot of hunting to find them and a lot of luck.
Well, to that hunting process, and also for some of our young documentary filmmakers that are watching, and Paulio, please chime in on this too, the fact checking. You know, I think that when you're dealing, especially with, I mean, the topic that you have tackled here is very explosive, very political, very touchy. But even for some of our documentary filmmakers, again, that might be watching, where they are dealing with people's lives and having to be as correct as possible, what does that fact-checking process look like?
It's, did you want to take that, Paulio?
No, that's your, you can.
Yeah. You got to come at it from every single angle you can. That's my experience is, and not taking anything for granted. Really, that's the key. Don't take anything for granted, no matter how much you trust someone, no matter how much you just love the way they say it and everything. You know, we had a few people, different interviewees that said something, and I was like, wow, I just love that quote. I can't wait to put that in the movie. And something just made me say, check it. You know, and it was, I would have checked it eventually, but, you know, I checked it earlier, and it turned out that they had misquoted it from, the statement was from a different university. And when I went and checked, the words were slightly different. It wasn't as like powerful as what it would have been in the original way. It wasn't inaccurate, but there was an error. And it was like, I would have loved to have just put that in there because it was just really, really great. And the way he said it was amazing, but it wasn't totally accurate the way he said it. So it was like everything required either internet research, calling, going through old documents, going through propaganda footage from Chinese regime. That was really the hardest thing, is trying to fact check those things, like what the insiders, these former regime officials, fact checking them. But I think even with family, I guess with personal experiences, you can be a bit more liberal in like not. It's not that you don't fact check, but you can let them tell their story. I feel, but in this type of film, because you know, it is, like you said, it's more touchy. It's you know, it's politically sensitive. We couldn't allow that either. So we really basically we fact checked everything they said. Researching, you know, I went through maps. I went through. I had translators. I was using Google Translate. I had just everything to make sure that where things happened, when they happened, who they happened to, did happen. And as Paulio mentioned, we did a lot of interviews with other people who aren't in the film, didn't make the cut. But that when interviewing them, I would make sure that I had some questions in there that would kind of be relevant, but I knew it wouldn't necessarily be in the film. But it was, the benefit to us was that it was a fact-checking process. So I was doing that throughout the process, constantly, not waiting until the very end, because then you start to forget things. But really just, it's so important, even for personal stories, just because people make mistakes, they forget, and memory can be, you know, kind of loose. So you got to, these kind of topics, you can't afford to make those mistakes.
Well, it's funny because when, you know, in some of the journalism and stories that we do, it's like, it's the person is telling this story as affirmed by their memory, but that doesn't make them infallible.
Correct.
You know? So, and Paulio, I'm wondering if there's times when you had footage that you like, the same with like a question or an interview quote, if there was footage that you're like, this is compelling footage, we can't use this.
Yeah, we had that heaps of times. I'd lost track of how many cuts we watched at different lengths, but I'd often be like, oh, but you cut that part out, and that was like from 3 cuts ago, and Kay would be like, yeah, but that was like, this is a different cut. And I'd be like, but that bit you missed. It was frustrating for sure, because you have this catalog in your mind, and you have your vision of what you hope it to get to, and it's sort of getting there, and then it was there, and 3 cuts ago, and now 2 cuts ahead, it's got this part. And yeah, so you just watch it a lot of times, and actually you watch it so many times, you become a little bit numb, and then you have to get other people to come in and start watching it, because like, when you're watching it, you're almost remembering previous things you've seen. And it's like you get, I found I got to a point where you start watching something and you're remembering things from the past, and then that's not what you're watching. But then you're like, it's hard to wipe your mind from all of the material you've looked at. So I think what helped with that was we just ended up bringing fresh, we did a lot of screenings with people just never seen it, people from the Chinese community, Westerners, and filmmakers, and then non-filmmakers, and just did Q&As and tried to figure out like, what can they follow, where are they getting lost, and then that helped reaffirm what I was thinking when I'd be watching the films. And a lot of the time towards the latest screenings, I didn't have too many comments, because I just wanted to hear what do the fresh people say that have never seen it, what's their perspective, because you just, that's what I find helps.
I'm hoping that any of our any students or young filmmakers are listening just heard what he said. Get those fresh eyes in there. That's so important to the process. And then how long did this whole process take for you, from the inception of we're going to make this 10-minute movie to now you're screening? How long did that whole thing take?
Oh, that was 5 years.
Yeah.
So and we followed the family for years, and even last year we did the final filming with them. So it was a long process. I mean, we had other things going on in between, and but the editing was, I mean, that was full time pretty much for 2.5 years. And it just takes a long time to get it right, long time to get the feedback, and yeah, it was really right at the end. We realized, okay, we're needing another interview to really tie things up. And because the structure had changed, it was, she originally, the main character didn't want to speak. She was afraid to speak. And then by the end of it, she was more willing to speak. And then she got a little bit more comfortable with the camera. And then she was like, okay. And that was only last year, after 4 years of getting to know us, that she was like, we did have some interviews with her where she was speaking previously, but it was last year that she really like opened up for a lot of her dialogue in the movie. Was from that interview where she just was able to let go a bit more, just let her guard down a bit more, and be a bit more open emotionally. It's kind of hard for people who've grown up in that environment. At least that's what I got to learn, is that they've been told what to say on camera for so long that to say, if I say, just how do you feel? They're like, what are you talking about? You tell me how I'm supposed to feel. It's like, no. So these were really long, painful interviews for everybody, because I'm like, no, I'm not going to tell you that. You're going to have to say how you feel. It's a real challenge for everybody. But yeah, we got back to that. But yeah. So 5 years in total. But even with the interview just last year to kind of tie things together. Yeah.
Well, like, think of the kismet of that. Like, if you had decided, nope, we're done at Mark III, it's a different film.
Yeah. That's right.
We had translators on set, like live translators, like in another room, who would tell us along each part of what they're talking about. Because in the past, at least when I did interviews in the past, we didn't, because I don't speak Chinese fluently, so if we didn't have translators on set, you kind of, just relying totally on the director or the person doing the interviews. So it was really helpful to have, Kay have a mic where she would hear a translator. I would also hear the translator, so I don't fall asleep. during the Chinese interview, and yeah, so it was fascinating to do that because I've never actually had that process when interviewing Chinese people, and I worked a lot on these types of films over the years, and so and that was like an additional thing that we always, when we had a production, it was always, okay, we need a translator. It was always like we had to tack a translator onto every production or find a translator in the area, so that there was like, we never missed anything. There was never like any confusion and things.
Well, actually, there was two translators. We needed one in another room to do the simultaneous translation in the that was coming through the headphones, and then another one sitting next to me to translate to the person in the room from my questions. And yeah, it worked, and I learned later that actually, some other filmmakers do this. So I was like, oh great, we've stumbled upon to this process that actually exists, and other people do this when interviewing. I learned that Ken Burns did that for the Vietnam War documentary, and so it's like, oh okay, great, we're doing something that's kind of it's an industry norm, but it's sometimes you just stumble upon it because just out of necessity. It's like, I need them to understand that I understand them right now as they're looking at me. I don't want them looking away and waiting for translation. And sometimes we got away with having one translator outside of the room, but that was always more stressful. So, being able to get two, one in the room and one outside, that was the ideal situation. And that it really worked that way.
And the trust that you've got to put into those translators to be able to not only be able to know that you're getting the correct information across, but you're getting the most authentic moments from the people you're interviewing.
It was a lot of the times the translators who were the most professional. We worked with some really like pro translators. They actually were not the best, and working with someone whose maybe English was a little bit limited, but they weren't trying to analyze it too much. They were just saying what they were saying, and sometimes they were kind of like combining words in English and making things up, and it was so funny, but it was accurate. And it was like they were kind of like combining words together, and I hadn't heard anyone do that before. It was fantastic, and I really got a good meaning from what they were saying. And they're like, why am I good? My English is terrible. Like it's not that, it's that really they were putting the heart into it, and they just weren't thinking. Whereas someone who's analyzing, they may be slower, and the main thing was speed, because we would then transcribe I would make sure it was a different transcriber in most cases that was doing the translation afterwards, and on paper for the paper edit, because the person in the room, I felt that we did need to check accuracy. So as you said, if it was the same person translating, how do I really know? And some translations were quite far off each other, and then I would get a third translation to check things, and that was essential. So yeah, it was just kind of, you had to have that process, because you can't take anything at face value, not journalistically, not with this kind of sensitive subject. So it's just better to be safe than sorry.
I want to get to a couple of our Q&A questions before we run out of time. So A, who has put their name up there, is A. I'm going to guess anonymous, who says the arm of the government dragnet is long. For example, Laura Portnoy's harassment from Homeland Security. Will you avoid going to China, to Chinese territories now, to avoid any trouble from China authorities? So I'm guessing they're meaning post-release of the film. Are you worried about any backlash?
Well, in terms of traveling to Chinese territories, that definitely, after our last film, I knew there is no chance of me going to China while the regime's in power. If I was to stay in there, I would likely be arrested. I may either won't be allowed to enter the country, or I may disappear. That's the reality. So, I wouldn't be able to go to Hong Kong now. I love Hong Kong. I've been there many times. I can't go to Hong Kong now. I definitely can't go to China again. So that's the risk you take. And so we went into this film knowing that, and even the last film, we kind of knew that might be the case, but now definitely so. But in terms of here in America, I think, I mean, there is a long arm from the Chinese regime over here for sure. But what we found is that those who, you know, kind of the louder you are, the safer you are. So it's better when they know who to target. They after interviewing all these like former spies and how they were monitoring us here, foreigners to them, you know, Westerners in our countries, they were telling us how they monitor us, and what they do and how they pressure, how they can convert us, and what pressure points will get us to give them the information and to turn on our fellow citizens. They know how to do it. They're really good at it. So what I found is really that it's not, it's the ones who are afraid or the ones who can be bought out. They're going to get you on fear. They're going to get you on money. So if you can kind of avoid those things and try and stick to your values and put that as a priority, then they really don't have anything on you. And that's what we also learned from Ife's story. And I think she says something like that in the film, that, you know, that's a real, it takes a lot of courage to do that, to put your values first. But then I think that's a fundamental. So that really came out through this process of the film for me, is just to really try and adhere to that, because if you let your values go, then it's very easy to be taken advantage of by a regime that does not share anywhere near the same values that we have. So it was a lot of eye-opening stuff for me during that process. So yeah, we'd certainly be in danger going over there, but we know not to.
Well, you know, I think it's eye-opening for the audience as well, is that, you know, we've sat and watched a feature-length film, a documentary, but what the impact of the work that went into this means, what it really means. That means you guys can't go there. You know, and there's real tangible threat. I want to grab a couple more of our Q&A questions, and I know Jay is gonna bark at me for going over time, but I think we should. Steve Jones writes, keeping the sister's body in a morgue for a decade or more seemed somewhat strange.
Exactly. There was so many things about this story that were bizarre, not just strange. I mean, 16 years her body was in the morgue. And I'm like, I don't understand. Translator, can you say that again? I'm not getting it. We didn't get it because it doesn't make sense. And so many things in this story did not make sense. And we had to know. I have the morgue records. I have the document from 2002 that says, we are going to cremate the body, come right now and sign the papers. And then the next year saying, since you haven't signed the papers, we're still going to cremate it, but they haven't. So, and really the two, Ife and Gordon, they have, most people wouldn't have the pressure that they have, that being able to exert the pressure on the city that they have. And most people, the bodies are gone. They don't last that long. And as you might have noticed in the film, they said her body is here the longest. That's what the morgue worker said. She's the longest case here. And this family have just been like amazing. They just have not given up. And they have so much. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. It seems absolutely strange. It seems absolutely bizarre. And that's why we felt we had to really unpack that and kind of get to the heart of, and it was also kind of hard to put that into the whole story. I mean, we could have told the whole film just about her, the body, but then to show the body is not nice. It's not nice to look at. We didn't want to show people that image. So we kind of had to balance out between the siblings. But yeah, it's strange, but it's real, and we have all the evidence to prove it.
You know, if nonfiction being stranger than fiction.
That's it.
Andrew writes, and is probably talking about our translator conversation earlier. There's another factor that might have impacted the trust, that is the subculture from which those people are from in China. If they are from the Northeast region, which has a unique dialect. Shanghai. So, you know, from those, depending on where the translator is from, but also their motives. And I think that's a really insightful point, Andrew. So,
it was very true. Yeah, we did have that problem. We learned that. You know, a translator said to me, "I'm like, what's going on? You know, this isn't working today." And she's like, he's from Shanghai. I'm from the North. I don't know what he's saying. I cannot understand. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how are we going to do this interview now? And I think we ended up switching translators, the one from inside the room and the outside the room. And after that, I asked, okay, what dialect and where, you know, what accent do you have? And we had to prep all that, because many times the translators in the written form, they would say, oh, that's from the North, that's from this part, that's from that part. I don't know that. Check it with someone else. So yeah, very true. Very true.
We're running short on time, so I want to give you both an opportunity to just kind of tell our audience what were some of the biggest challenges that you wish you had, like, you know, another swing at the bat at, or what were some of the biggest unexpected joys that came out of this film? I'm going to give you like 0 time to think about that, but
you go first, Paulio.
I think for me, filming this film, like I felt like I was kind of blindfolded a lot of the time, and I kind of had some ideas. I don't know where they came from, and I'm like, well, how about this? And then, okay, but here's some ideas, and you know, you're bouncing around, but you're not really sure. Like, you're not really sure, is this what I should focus on? Is that what I should focus on? Where should we put the time in the day? We'd spend, you know, time prepping these shoots to go out to San Francisco and overseas, and you were just hoping that, okay, well, it costs a lot of money to go way to the other side of the world. I hope that interview makes the cut and it's useful, you know. And then, like, especially the trip to New Zealand, that was like an expensive, you know, last minute trip, and you know, getting the funds for these films is challenging. So yeah, I think like I felt like for a long time I was just, you know, blindfolded, and I was like, okay, I've got faith that this could be a good story, and you know, I'm sure Kay will pull something off. So let's go.
I love it.
Yeah, I guess mine's the biggest. What would I do differently is the workflow and the editing. So, you know, technical there. I have never edited something like this before, and so you know, someone else was going to edit it, and then right at the last minute they couldn't do it, so I started, and then they came back and saw what I did, and they're like, you really should keep doing this. So it kind of happened by default that I was editing, but having no post-production supervisor, having no, you know, we didn't have a lot of budget for editing, and all of the post stuff. And then the time grew, the software updates happened, the hard drives expanded, the libraries, oh my gosh. And so, you know, it's like, who do I call? How do I solve this problem all the time? And like, something's gone wrong, what do I do? So that was just the biggest, you know, that's just been a nightmare, got to say, for the last couple of years. Yeah, so that I would do differently. There's a lot of there's just so much things that I learned that I would like, okay, next time I'm going to do this, and make sure we do this. So workflow when it comes to editing. And yeah, so but you know, the good of it is that I learned a lot. So, you know, and that I can say I will do that next time. So yeah, definitely would do that differently.
Do you have, well, let me ask it to you this way. What is the reason, the one biggest reason in your mind that somebody needs to sit down and watch this film?
Because everyone needs hope. You know, now is a really tough time. You know, we're all sitting at home. We're all in different situations. There's crazy things going on in the world. There's crazy things going on around us. Things are confusing. Stories, films, can bring us up, or they can push us down. And this story, what these characters have been through, they've been through hell, but they came out the other side, and they came out with courage, with hope, with inspiration. But they're just such humble, modest people. And I think anyone, doesn't matter what your background is, or you know, political inclination or anything, you can kind of look at these people and say, wow, they came through that. Wow, maybe I could come through that too. And it was like, I had that when I'm getting through my challenges, and I'm thinking, you know, they got through this stuff. I really don't have much to complain about. Like you said, perspective. And I think anyone to sit down and watch this movie, you're going to be uplifted. And you're going to be able to look at life in a different way, and have, you know, there's a lot of good examples out there, but here's another good example. And we need more examples. Get through this tough time and I'm going to find a way to do it, and I'm going to be strong, and it may hurt people, but I'm not going to let my values down, and I'm going to come out on the other end and really look after my family, look after my friends, and it may put everyone in danger, but yeah, it's that kind of thing. You want a hopeful story, you want something uplifting, you want to experience that. Just grab some popcorn and and sit down and watch the movie, and I really think it will bring some hope we really need these kind of stories now. I hope more people can make positive, uplifting stories. It's definitely a good example for me to learn from.
Absolutely. And I want to thank you both. So we have Paulio Shakespeare. Thank you for being with us today.
Yeah,
and
thank you very much, guys.
And Kay Rubacek, thank you
you
so much. The film is Finding Courage. I wanted to read the rest of it. Finding Courage, a true story of one family who dared to be free. And showing right now at the Woods Hole Film Festival. Hey, you can check it out, woodsholefilmfestival.org. Films are screening through August 1st. Again, both of you, thank you for taking the time, and truly, thank you for your work on this. It's an amazing film, and I hope more people get to see it.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
You too.